Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Agile IT Tech Talk. So, last week, or in our last session, we talked about how to use Microsoft Teams' new webinar feature. However, to enable registration for people outside of our organization, I mentioned that we needed to run a PowerShell command in the environment. So today, I'm joined by Alex Egana, our resident PowerShell Prodigy, who's going to talk a bit about this and show us how it's done, as well as some of the other features in PowerShell for Teams. How are you doing today, Alex?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing great. Let me bring up your screen here. You're sharing in Teams. And what we're seeing here is it doesn't look like my PowerShell. What is this?
This is Visual Studio Code.
Okay. This looks much different, but looks cool. So what are we going to do first?
First, we're actually just going to walk through kind of the differences between the Microsoft Teams module and the Skype for Business module. So Microsoft's really making a push for people to use the new Microsoft Teams module, which I highly recommend because it basically brings together the Skype for Business commandlets and the Microsoft Teams commandlets just into one module. So it just simplifies managing both environments.
Okay.
And going from there, installing it's really straightforward. It's our first line in our little script we have here, and it's just calling install module Microsoft Teams. And once it's installed, we're just going to go ahead and import it as well.
So what's the difference between installing and importing?
Installing brings the module files actually to your machine and, puts them within the PowerShell module path, whether that be in your documents folder or your program files, whichever you specify. In this example, since we're leaving some of those additional parameters out, this would install to our program files directory. And then importing it just brings that module into the current PowerShell session, which will allow us to use those commandlets.
Okay. And then what happens?
And then the magic happens. From there, we're going to dive right in, and we're going to go ahead and sign into Teams. And so running this commandlet right here, which is connect-microsoftteams, will go ahead and authenticate us. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my account right here. And if we see this output right here, we are connected and good to go. And now the Microsoft Teams module contains a lot of commands. And like I said before, it does encapsulate all the Skype for Business commandlets as well. So if we go ahead and run this line right here in our terminal session, and this is going to show us the available commands.
Oh, wow.
We can see a lot of information. And some of these, for those who worked with Skype for Business a lot in PowerShell, can actually recognize most of these commandlets as being from the Skype for Business module. So it's kind of nice to see their updated versions here and in a single place.
I see meeting policies, mobility policies. I recognize a lot of these from the admin side.
Yeah, every option from the admin portal is actually available through PowerShell as well. So you can actually automate a lot of settings configurations. Like you can actually script out a lot of changes.
Now that's got, in my mind, there is an issue in GCC High that the Teams templates don't work the same as they do in commercial. At a later date, I'm probably going to pick your brain about that. That might be super useful for some of our clients.
Absolutely, because I know team templates help a lot in speeding up the creation of team sites, and actually a very useful feature.
Wonderful. So then which command are you looking at running now?
Now I'm actually going to stick solely to the commandlets that are available only in the Microsoft Teams module, which are very useful commands and very basic commands to help manage team sites and channels, and as well as display some user information about some of the users within that team site. So first, I'm going to go ahead and just pick or just get the properties from the sales and marketing team site. So I'm going to go ahead and run this command or this line right here. And I'm going to store that in a variable called team so we can call that later on. So I'm going to go ahead and run my command. We're going to see a little nice progress bar that was briefly on screen. That just showed us that it's in the process of getting the information. And from here, we didn't see any output. But if we go ahead and call that variable, we can actually see some of the basic information here. So we can see the group ID, which is a GUID attached to every single team site. We can see the display name of the team site right here, its visibility, its archive settings, and its mail nickname, and just a brief description because it does cut off since there's a lot of information there.
Okay.
Now with that information, we can actually go ahead and look at the channels within that team site. So kind of following the same path as the last command, all we need to do is just either write down the group ID that was from this command, since we're going to use that for all other commandlets called. In this case, I'm just calling the group ID directly from the team variable, and I'm going to store that within the channels variable. So I'm going to go ahead and run this line on there. Now, unfortunately, we don't get a nice progress bar like the team site, but this one did take a little bit of a shorter time to run, as we can see by the custom profile here.
We may have got it, we just weren't fast enough to see it.
Yeah, that might be. And so we'll go ahead and run channels, and we can just see two channels. We can see general and monthly reports. And we notice that the ID is actually different from the last one. It's not a GUID. That's because the team channels actually have a more unique ID as well to help with differentiation.
Okay. And then next, it looks like we're going to get the users.
Yep, we're going to see the users attached to that team site as well as their role within that team site. So go ahead and run it, passing in the team ID from before, or the group ID from the team site before, and we can see our list of users. Now we can see from here the ID of the user being the first value, the user principal name of the user, and then their display name as well as their role within here. And so we can go through and just look and see these are our owners. So these users are able to modify the team site as well as add or remove channels. And then we just have our standard users here, or our standard members. And so from there, it's nice and everything. You can get the information. This is the same information just from the portal. What's really valuable about going through PowerShell? Well, it's speeding up the process. So now, since I have the group ID of the team site, I can actually start modifying properties through PowerShell. Like, let's say, since we looked at the team beforehand, and my terminal is actually cutting a little bit off, so I will go ahead and run this line again, or run the team variable. We can see that the visibility is public. Now, let's just say we don't want the sales and marketing team site to be public. We should really restrict its visibility to only the members. Not everyone in the company should see that team site. Well, if we want to make that change, it's actually really simple in PowerShell. We're just going to call the set team commandlet. And as the context menu is saying, it allows us to update the properties of a team, including its display name, description, or other specific settings. In this specific case, I'm going to change the visibility to private. And so I'm going to go ahead and run this line, passing in the group ID. And we can see that it returned the updated properties of the team site, as well as the visibility, as well as reflecting the change in visibility, with it now being private.
Okay, I can see where that would be handy. Now change it back, because this is the sales and marketing team, man. You don't want salespeople, even in a demo tenant, complaining.
Yeah, exactly. And if we want to change it, all we need to do is just change this to public and go ahead and run the same line. And we can see our property went ahead and changed.
All right. Otherwise, you don't know how important sales can be. That might have been a resume generated event.
Exactly. A lot of people wanted to go in and look at that and be like, hey, where's this team site?
And
want to get in on that.
Alex, can you share the command that we use to enable allowing registration for people outside the organization?
Yes, that commandlet was set CS Teams meeting policy, and I went ahead and pasted it into the terminal right down here. The rest of that was, I can pull that as well. We were, we gave it a couple parameters. So we gave it, that's the wrong character. We gave it the global, we passed global to the identity parameter and everyone to the who can register parameter.
Okay, and then global, that means it applies to the entire tenant?
Correct.
Okay. And so I know we've talked a bit here, but if you are trying to enable the ability to allow outside registration for Teams webinar, that's the command. I will have that command down below in the comments or in the description of the video, as well as a couple of these other commands that Alex has shown off. Did you have anything else to show off, Alex?
The only thing I had to show off is really how to disconnect, since the Microsoft Teams module is a bit unique in how it connects, in which it actually opens up a remote session in the background. So on top of calling the disconnect commandlet to close the session for Teams, we also have to close the remote session that it opens in the background. And this is important because if you keep opening remote sessions, eventually Teams will actually not allow you to sign in, as you already have open sessions.
Okay.
And this is also important because when you close a PowerShell window, that session doesn't actually close automatically.
And I'm sure that's a feature, not a bug.
Correct. Yep. Definitely a feature.
All right. So show us what that does.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and call disconnect Microsoft Teams. And we can see we get no feedback. It was just quick. It was just immediate. But if we call a team specific commandlet now, like get team, we're actually going to get an error saying that we're not connected.
Okay.
And that's because the Microsoft Team commandlets that solely rely on Teams itself need that connection created from Connect. That's not the actual remote session. The remote session is actually used for the commandlets that are shared with the Skype for Business.
Okay.
thing. So if I actually call a command similar to that meeting policy command that we were in separately, but instead called get CS Teams meeting policy. Oh, this one will actually fail as well. Okay. So, never mind, I was wrong on that. I actually thought it used that remote session solely, but it does look like it actually uses both a combination of the remote session and of the Teams session. So either way, we do need to close the remote session, since if we do call a get PS session, we can see that that remote session is actually closed.
Well, surprise.
That is a surprise.
So disconnect Microsoft Teams actually ends the remote session in this one.
It does. That must actually be a new feature.
And this is how we often find new features in PowerShell, it seems.
Yes, it is. Trial through fire. You got to go through and actually run the commands.
That's why I'm so glad we have you on our team, Alex.
Yeah, that's actually probably one of the best changes I've seen to this module. So now we can actually not have to worry about cleaning up our sessions. Wonderful. And let the disconnect module or disconnect commandlet take that over.
Now, when I did this yesterday from my side, I was playing around after, and this happened to me, and I thought it was just because I don't know how to PowerShell my way out of a wet paper bag. So good to know it was not just me, although I will always lean on you for your PowerShell expertise. All right, well, thank you very much, Alex. That was incredibly helpful. For those of you watching on YouTube, please give us a like and follow. I do have all of those PowerShell commandlets that Alex talked about down below. Alex, is there anything you want to say out to the audience?
I just want to say, just hope you find working the Microsoft Teams module useful as I have, because it is actually probably one of the modules that I actually use on a daily basis. I would say I have a lot of scripts that actually run against this module.
Thank you again, Alex, so much. You've been a great help in both enabling our last session as well as showing things off in this session, and I'm sure we'll have you back again soon.
Anytime.